Connor, would you let me ask you a question?
Yes, Steve, you may ask me a question.
Connor,
Steve?
welcome back
Yes.
to the newly relaunched and rebranded Radio Rialto.
Mm-hmm.
This is something we attempted all the way back in 2018, and then we put childish things behind, and then we have twice found ourselves with an absurd amount of free time, and has since been relaunched. Let me fix my headphones back. I had to adjust to do that stupid bit.
Is that going to stay for the mask?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
It wasn't funny in the movie. It's not funny now.
You didn't think it was funny in the movie Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, the funniest movie of all time?
We live in a very contentious times in terms of our nation's relationship with our police. That being said, this movie has no idea how policing works.
No.
In any way, shape, or form.
Emilio is the only good cop in the whole thing.
Well, anyway, I got fucking sidetracked. We're already deep in some nonsense. Connor?
Yes.
We watched how many X-Men movies?
10.
10 out of 12. 13 upcoming.
Yes.
And how do you feel about not just X-Men movies, but about like movies right now?
I was telling you earlier before we recorded, I've watched too many this year. I'm starting to lose it. They're starting to lose their luster. Thank God, another huge cultural landmark for me. The Last of Us Part 2 comes out soon. It'll already come out by the time you guys are listening to this. But
so by the end of that, you'll be sick of video games.
Oh yeah. Oh, never. I can never get sick of my girl Ellie.
Have the reviews been good? I have not been paying
amazing.
attention.
Like immaculate.
I've heard they're fairly contentious, but they're only contentious with bad people. So
yeah,
that's.
Well, here's if you look on like Metacritic, it's no aggregate site is perfect. Yeah. A lot of their like views that aren't scored because not all outlets score are very like negative. But since they're not like scored reviews, they don't count towards the Metacritic rating.
Yeah,
I mean, I'd probably say it's like probably like 80%. Like it's definitely fresh for sure.
Just not as universally acclaimed as the first one.
Yeah. No, even if this game was like zeros across the board, my excitement would not like hinder. I almost said hamper. It would not hamper my excitement. That's what I'm going. Yeah. I've been waiting for this since like 2016.
Yeah.
So no, I'm all on board.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. This isn't Last of Us talk. It'll be a better time.
The point is, we were feeling some burnout. And Connor had a really good idea for a short little miniseries, and Connor, I'll let you describe it.
Yeah, well,
we kind of went into it in the Dark Phoenix episode.
We
but
did,
just
yeah.
For the
in case they're not avid listeners,
people who are jumping on this retrospective.
They're like, I want some Ace Ventura Pet Detective content right now. I already watched Ace Ventura Pet Detective Jr. I want Radio Rialto talking about Ace Ventura Pet Detective. Yeah, I'm in such a weird mood today. It's a good mood. So after the X-Men series, The Expedition, we are doing JC94, which is our Jim Carrey 1994. Well, are we calling it this or the shorts one? What are we calling it?
I thought we agreed on JC1994.
Okay, I'm making
JC94.
Sure. Oh, just no. JC94. Okay, it's called JC94. It is our retrospective on the year that Jim Carrey rose to stardom with...
Skyrocketed.
He skyrocketed to stardom with Ace Ventura Pet Detective, which I've already said a dozen times in this episode, The Mask, and then Dumb and Dumber.
Yeah.
Which are, if you know me, Dumb and Dumber is probably my favorite comedy ever.
Yeah.
So I'm very excited to get to that.
So it was a nice little... it's definitely a different thing than X-Men. It's not one franchise. Instead, we'll be talking about a sort of a selection of an oeuvre, if you will. Mm-hmm. And it's just, we talked about this probably on the Dark Phoenix episode, but it's one of those unparalleled, insane overnight success stories.
Yeah, completely.
And we thought it was a good little refresher before we delve ourselves back into a different franchise.
Mm-hmm.
Very different slate of films. They're all fairly unique from each other. They each have their own flavor. Not only just between themselves, but compared to the movies we had talked about before.
Yes, so, they're very different than Dark Phoenix and Logan.
So before we could get to any of these movies, I would quickly like to have some backstory on James Carey himself. I took notes for this. This is going to be very quick. I'm not.
You're gonna talk about Percy?
Yeah. What the fuck is Percy?
That's his dad's name. His dad was like really influential in his childhood.
Oh, you probably know different stuff about me. I'm mainly going off a couple articles on Wikipedia here.
Oh, I love Jim Carrey. I'm gonna make a Jim Carrey biopic one day.
Yeah. The two things I knew about Jim Carrey's life before he started acting was that he's Canadian, and that there's this crazy story that you hear all the time from like motivational speakers and whatnot if you're like 12, in that when he was not being really successful in show business, he made a promise to himself that he wrote himself a $10 million check and he kept it in his wallet. And he's like, one day I'll be able to cash this. And then after Dumb and Dumber, he was able to cash it. This, then, the other thing. The power of perseverance, if you believe in yourself, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
That's about it. Besides the obvious things, like he started in stand-up, and then he went into TV and movies, this, then, the other thing. So
do you want to hear the really dark ending to that check story?
Sure.
His dad died shortly after Dumb and Dumber, so he put it in the coffin. Like in his dad's casket.
God. I heard that he cashed it. Like
I'm pretty sure he said he put it in the casket. I'm pretty sure.
Wow. Then again, this was in the days where you got your checks back, I think. I think it was before that your checks just stayed in a bank.
Maybe. I don't know. If I'm wrong.
The point is, he wrote himself a $10 million check.
Yeah.
And he eventually got paid $10 million for Dumb and Dumber, or maybe he made
he got
residuals.
It was Dumb and Dumber. I'm pretty sure.
Was it for being in Dumb and Dumber, or did he get like back end stuff? Okay, wow.
I'm pretty sure because him and Jeff Daniels, the pay discrepancy was humongous,
huge, and we'll get into why that happened at the end of this episode.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, things I knew about Jim Carrey: he grew up in Canada. He grew up in Ontario, in a suburb outside of Toronto. Things I did not know: he's the youngest of four. He was raised Catholic, which kind of makes sense when you think about it. Obviously very inspired by Jerry Lewis and Monty Python. Those are probably the two main influences that you'd be able to dig out of his style of performing, especially in this era. Wanted to pursue a career in comedy. I think I did not know that he and the brother directly above him, the third child, dropped out of high school. He dropped out of high school on his 16th birthday because his family had financial trouble, and he went straight to work in a local factory, in like a steel mill, which I did not know. And there was a point where the four of them, I think the two older siblings were out of the house by then, were living in a van, like they were homeless. Mm-hmm. And eventually when they were able to financially restable themselves and get an actual place to stay, that he started pursuing stand-up again. A thing that I did not know. At some point in the early 80s, he eventually made his way out to Los Angeles, where he got minor parts here and there. Jim Carrey was weird because he was definitely in that same age range and time period where he could have been a Brat Pack guy, but he just completely wasn't. I think the main difference is a lot of those kids or young adults at the time came from like some sort of acting training, which he did not. And also they all knew each other, and they're like from, like half of them are from Chicago, because like John Hughes is from Chicago and he would shoot his movies in Chicago, so we would hire local talent and then they would eventually make their way to Los Angeles, things like that. And he didn't have any of the local connections in that, and he was just this weird guy where he was a square-jawed, like handsome guy, tall, dark hair, but he just had this weird energy. And you can watch like clips from different things where he hasn't fully figured out the Jim Carrey thing, but you can see little bits of it like forming. So he got some work, he got some attention when he was doing stand-up. He would do stuff at the Comedy Store. A few years ago, he executive produced that Showtime special show, I'm Dying Up Here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's like, he was pretty heavily involved with creation. It's partially based on his life and other comedians that he knew. He was in a very short-lived 13-episode show that got canceled very quickly called The Duck Factory, which was from Mary Tyler Moore's production company. I watched the pilot before watching Ace Ventura. I wanted to get a taste of young. It was like his first big thing. Like he had done a couple things before, but like he was the star of this show. He was like the young lead. It's not very good. I think you can find all of it, or at least most of it, on YouTube. It's so weird because I didn't watch any of the other episodes, but the pilot at least is a single camera show that still has a laugh track, which that style had completely gone out of fashion by that point, and now seems completely alien that a non-sitcom is, has a laugh track. Anyway, The Duck Factory, it's not good. He played like a young animator who, from a small town, I think they said Idaho, who moves to Los Angeles because to work at this animation studio. I think it's loosely based on like both Hanna-Barbera and Termite Terrace, which was the studio in Warner Brothers that animated the Looney Tunes. It's not good. There's all sorts of character people that you might recognize, especially if you've watched a lot of film and television from the mid-'70s through the early '80s. And then after that, he has three pretty big-ish... I say big loosely.
Peggy Sue Got Married?
Peggy Sue is the biggest, but that movie did not do well when it came out. One day, I would like to talk about Peggy Sue Got Married. But that will be a long time from now. Anyway, his first big break is a movie called Once Bitten. Have you seen Once Bitten?
I have not. I want to check that out too, though. I get that and Vampire's Kiss mixed up all the time.
They're from a similar time period. They're both vampire. It came out in 1985, which is like around the same time as like Fright Night and Teen Wolf. It's more in lieu of Teen Wolf. It's like a weird vampire sex farce where there's this 400-year-old vampire and she preys on young men to steal their youth. But I think he plays like a high school senior and things like that.
I've seen the trailer for it.
I watched the trailer for this as well. I always knew it as like one of those like Full Moon High type of like horror comedies, more emphasis on the comedy of like the early 80s. I don't think that did particularly well, but it's a lead role. It's his first lead role in a film, whereas he had appeared in a bunch of stuff in like very, very small parts. And, he slowly transforms into a vampire, so he gets to show off his sort of rubber face thing at an early level. He plays have you seen Peggy Sue Got Married?
I have not.
Great movie. He plays a very, very small part. He probably has like 6 lines total. He's one of Nick Cage's buddies, like in his little group of guys in that movie. But not a major thing. And then probably, arguably, one of the most important career moves of his entire young career at that point, he was in a little film called Earth Girls Are Easy. Have you seen Earth Girls Are Easy?
No, I haven't. My carry begins in like 94.
Yeah, where most people has. I saw Earth Girls Were Easy once on television when I was 9 years old, and it was the strangest thing I had ever seen in my entire life. So like good chunks of that movie are forever, like imagery in that movie is like forever burned into my brain because it just has the weirdest tone in the world. Gina Davis plays this young single sort of ingenue type character, and a UFO lands in her pool, and there's these big furry aliens. I think Jim Carrey's the red one. I think Jeff Goldblum, I know for a fact, is the blue one.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Jim Carrey's the red one, and I think, is it Marlon Wayans?
You're barking up the wrong tree. I have no idea.
It's one of the Wayans, because the point I'm getting to is that that's pretty much how he got in Living
It's
Color.
Damon Wayans.
It's Damon Wayans. There's 6 million Wayans. I get them all confused.
It is on Tubi. I'll be checking that out later.
Yeah. Weird movie. The second and final theatrical film from legendary music video director Julian Temple. His first theatrical film, Connor, Absolute Beginners.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it has a more coherent plot than Absolute Beginners, if that's very faint praise right there. It's a weird fucking movie. I have not seen it in a long time. I cannot comment on its quality. But it's it's an interesting piece of popular culture. And then his real big break is In Living Color, which unfortunately never really that show was hugely influential at the time, but its cultural footprint outside of like all these amazing people got their start out of it, mainly the Wayans family, and well, they didn't get their start, but that was like their big. They went to the mainstream now, and because they made. Oh God, I feel so terrible for not properly knowing my Wayans history, because I think I'm Gonna Get You Sucker is a Wayans project. Yeah, Keenan Ivory Wayans directed and wrote I'm Gonna Get You Sucker. So it was not long after that that they got this television show. And the early 90s are really interesting because there was like a slew of variety shows, which doesn't really exist anymore. Like there was Kids in the Hall. Obviously Saturday Night Live was having sort of a resurgence. They had a slew of young talent, and it was the most popular it had been in like almost 20 years at that point. And the big thing is that Jim Carrey on that show, the novelty was that he was the white guy on the predominantly black cast. Which wouldn't we as audiences be so lucky if such a novelty existed today? If there was one white guy on a predominantly black show. And so he would play all these strange parts and sketches like that. Anyway, the point I was trying to make earlier is that In Living Color for us never really existed in like reruns or things. So I had never really watched an episode. I just knew that was the show. It was like the Wayans sort of brainchild, and it was Jim Carrey's big break. He went from like this nobody who appeared in movies and TV here and there and mainly existed in the stand-up comedy boom. But have you ever watched his stand-up?
Yes. There's the one special that's like not been going around, but it's pretty easy to find on YouTube. I've seen that one. That's
his only like actual recorded special, and then there's a couple like TV appearances here and there for like Just for Laughs and things like that.
Mm-hmm. I've seen him on Carson.
Yeah, it's strange. It's just in the early 80s there was this huge boom where stand-up comedy was suddenly everywhere. There were multiple clubs in cities that had never had clubs before, and cable television now allowed this space for comedians to release material to the public, in which they never had before, because on broadcast television, which every now and again would have a stand-up special, but rarely. They primarily were on late night shows and like very small, like 5-minute segments. They were allowed to be blue or racier or try different things that they were never allowed to on broadcast television. So all these different things aligned at the same time, that you couldn't swing a hockey stick in a major city without hitting a stand-up comic. And Jim Carrey was part of that, and he was able to craft this niche where he wasn't a prop comic, he didn't tell stories, he didn't have like standard jokes. He just had this weird, insane Tasmanian devil energy, and he was able to translate that to things like In Living Color, and then eventually through that, they were able to make movies like Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. And now we're finally at our movie. Tom Shadyac and a couple other people involved, I think we're all involved with In Living Color to some capacity, which is how this was able to materialize. And then Steve Odenkirk, who directed the sequel, When Nature Calls, is a In Living Color writer. Or was, I should say. Anyway, that's all my historical bullshit nonsense.
Yeah.
That was... Connor.
Yeah.
Let's just get into it. What did you think of Ace Ventura: Pet Detective?
It's a bad movie. It's not really funny, except for here's all my positives are just individual bits that are in the first majority of the first half of the movie.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was kind of taken aback by just how weak this movie is.
Yeah.
Because obviously I was telling you I haven't seen it in a decade, and watching it back, it's like, this is just bad.
Was this a movie that you grew up? What's your experience with Jim Carrey? I mean, we obviously have some sort of affection for him.
I grew up with The Mask and Dumb and Dumber.
Yeah.
And to a lesser extent, Me, Myself, and Irene. I'm blanking on other early Carreys right now that I've watched. Oh my goodness gracious. Oh, Liar, Liar. That was also a big one. Ace Ventura was on the outside of all those. I'd probably seen Ace. It's probably my third time seeing it in my life overall. When, if you know me, I've seen Dumb and Dumber over 20 times. And I've seen Liar Liar probably like 8. It's a thing where I recycled Carrey. Like, you know how a kid has like a favorite movie? Jim Carrey was like my favorite actor. I would just watch his stuff over and over and over again, mostly those movies.
That was me with Robin Williams.
Yeah. So, I mean, I love Jim Carrey. That's one of the things I have too, is I talk about like, I love Jim Carrey. I despise Ace Ventura. I do not like that man.
What is your experience with Ace Ventura as a property, I should say?
Well, I saw Ace when I was young around the same time, but it never hit me as hard as like Liar Liar or like Dumb and Dumber or The Mask. So I just kind of like, that was like lesser Carrey in my mind, so I didn't hit it nearly as much. And then When Nature Calls just is garbage, and I think I've seen that like once all the way through. And I mentioned earlier Ace Ventura Jr. Back in 2000, back in 2007, for some reason I was hyped as heck for Ace Ventura Jr. on Cartoon Network, and even then I was like, "This is hot garbage."
Was it made for Cartoon Network? Because I didn't know it ever aired on Cartoon Network. I knew it as a straight to video thing.
See, I don't know if it was made for Cartoon Network. I'm not sure. That's where I saw it. I remember it was announced on Cartoon Network, and I thought it was the original. Oh, 2009. Wow, I feel even worse that I was excited in 2009 for this.
You were almost 11 years old, probably.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I'm not seeing if it was made for Cartoon Network or not. Okay, it says American Television standalone. Oh, yeah, it was made for Cartoon Network.
Interesting. Very
That's
interesting. Because I think Ace Ventura was financially, independently financed. And then Warner Brothers got the distribution rights. Because probably, the only fucking logo that appears in the beginning is Morgan Creek Entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it has a major studio involved with distribution, and I'm pretty sure it's Warner Brothers, which owns Cartoon Network, and that would make sense.
Yeah.
I don't know who owns the rights to the character whole cloth. My experience with Jim Carrey is very similar to yours. He was just like one of the... because when you're a kid, you just watch whatever movie's presented in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like one of the few actors, like even if I don't think I could name Jim Carrey, but I knew who Jim Carrey was if I saw him. And he's very accessible for small children, especially in this era of his career, because he's so goofy. And his characters tend to be very childish themselves. So I think that's part of the reason, and I think that's part of the reason a lot of these comedies, even some of them undeservingly, have maintained their level of belovedness because people saw them so young, and there's a fair amount of nostalgia for him as a entity in general. Not that he's not also a super talented performer. We'll probably get into that more so in our later 2 episodes, probably. But yeah, Bruce Almighty was huge for me and my brother. We would watch that movie all the time. Liar Liar as well. The Mask, definitely. My cousins had The Mask on VHS, so we watched that one a lot. We'll get into that more in our next episode. But not really Dumb and Dumber. I didn't really see that until middle school. I had a very profound experience with The Truman Show. Mm-hmm. I saw The Truman Show. I was homesick from school, and I was probably only 10 or 11. And I watched that movie because it was like, oh, Jim Carrey movie. This premise sounds interesting. Kind of expecting it to be more comedic than it is. And that movie at 10 or 11 blew my mind. Like, that movie's it's a good movie, and it's fairly intelligent. But, like, for at that impressionable of an age, I'm just like, oh, shit. I see things a little different now. So that's probably my favorite Carrey, is that movie. Mm-hmm. And with the Ace Venturas, I don't think I've seen either of these all the way through. It's just that Jim Carrey, especially when we were younger, these movies were on TV incessantly. They were... You couldn't... it seems like I was running into a Jim Carrey movie all the time on television if I was flipping through the channels. Which is why... So many of these movies I've just seen in piecemeal a million times. Which is a phenomenon that I think kids growing up today won't have. No. They don't... Because they just... It's YouTube or it's Netflix.
Kids don't watch TV anymore.
Yeah.
I think we feel so old saying that. But yeah. The days of, like, just scrolling through and catching, like, the last 10 minutes of Mask on TBS, like, don't exist for people younger than us.
Because when I was at different ages, probably up to the age of, like, 14, 15, probably when we got Netflix and I stopped watching cable, except for the shows that I watched with my parents, I would have like the 10 or 15 channels that I knew could have something on that I would like. And I would just go through each one individually, type it out on the remote. It was like, all right, here's 40, nothing there. 41, nothing there, like, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So Ace Ventura, both Pet Detective and When Nature Calls, have blended into one movie for me, and I didn't know which was from which scene. I mean, some of them is pretty obvious, because in the second one he goes to the jungle, right?
Yes.
So there are certain ones where it's like, well, obviously there has to be in Nature Calls, so this scene must be in Pet Detective, et cetera, et cetera. But I've never watched these anyway through. Of the three movies we were going to cover, this is probably the one I have the least nostalgia for. Not that Dumb and Dumber is a beloved movie for me, but it's a movie I'm more familiar with. Mm-hmm. But this movie is huge, because we'll get into it probably towards the end. This was like a surprise, massive hit. And it really kicked off this entire year with a really big bang. If Jim Carrey's 1994 was just Ace Ventura, I feel like he would be a big star throughout the 90s as well, but I don't think he would have been the monumental force that he was throughout that following decade. Yeah. If it weren't for the additional blows of the upcoming two movies. So do you have any talking points that you want to go into? I have a couple things written down.
I mean, the one talking point I have is about the Ray Finkel stuff. Which, I think the Ray Finkel stuff, up until the actual reveal, is really cool and very compelling. Ideally, if I was a I was like, hey, notes on the script back in, 1993... I would have been like, what if you make the Lois character, like, Ray Finkel's sister? Like, he kills himself in the mental asylum, and that's his sister, like, taking revenge. I think that's effective and not problematic. That's just me, though.
It is both those things. It is both effective and not problematic. But it's also, like, very hackney. Like, that's a thing in, like, murder mysteries that's happened, like, a shit ton of times.
Yeah, I know.
No, let's save the Ray Finkel stuff for the end.
Yeah, that's my only talking point, though, is because I like it up until then.
In that case, I'll pull out my notes, and I'll sort of lead the discussion here, because I have a few different talking points. One thing, general thoughts. Beyond the things that are deemed problematic now, this movie has not aged poorly just because the two of us specifically, but as a society, are more politically correct and believe in, I don't know, empathy, human decency, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. Shouldn't judge others just because they're different than you. This is elementary school stuff here. It's not just the transphobia and the homophobia, which no one talks about, because there's that there too. It's the most faintest praise I could ever give this movie is, at least it's not racist. At least it's not actively racist. It checks the other two big ones.
Yeah.
It just has not. Just the comedy has aged like cottage cheese left in a hot car. I feel like, because you know me, Connor.
Yeah.
I have coined a term in which I call Gen X bullshittery, which I have a very low tolerance for, that this movie is littered with. Jim Carrey is in that he was born in 1962, so he's on that weird cusp where he's kind of a boomer, kind of a Gen Xer. He's one of those weird in-betweeners where he doesn't really fit one generation. But this movie's attitude just reeks of, like, cynical Gen X nonsense. You know, fuck authority, not because we have anything to say, but for the sake of just fuck authority, you know. And it's just littered with pop cultural references that there's no joke, it's just he's making the reference. Mm-hmm. It's just, and on top of it all is that Ace Ventura is one of the least compelling protagonists I have seen in a long time. And he has stiff competition. Because it's just a movie that just reeks of, like, a white man of this age's, like, fantasies, where I can just be a dick to everyone because society sucks, but I'm not that deep of an individual, and also I'm the most obnoxious human being in the world, but yet two beautiful women. Mm-hmm. I don't even know what to classify the Sean Young character as, because
trans women are women.
No.
I know that's not what you're saying. I get that you're saying.
That's not what I'm saying. Trans women absolutely are women. And if you disagree, log out of this video.
Yes,
trans
exactly.
women are women. Trans men are real men. The Ray Fisher character / Lois Einhorn
Yes.
is not trans.
Yes.
But a trans person is someone who identifies with a different gender than they were biologically assigned. There is nothing about the Ray Fisher / Lois character that implies that this is a change that they've struggled with their entire life.
No, it's purely a means of disguise and like faking stuff.
It's a plot. It's a ploy.
Yes.
Every complaint that has been made towards the Buffalo Bill character in Silence of the Lambs actually applies to Ray Fisher.
Yeah.
Especially because they imply that this person is quote-unquote insane.
Yes.
In the most blanket, lazy fucking 1990s movie version of insane.
Yes.
Where
Ramblings
he's
in a
on
journal,
the
wall,
journals. Die Dan laces out over and over again. Like every shitty portrayal of the Joker ever. I'm looking at you, Todd Phillips. When I was saying whether or not we can classify Sean Young's character as a woman, it's not me saying that trans women are not women. Trans women absolutely are women. I would not classify this character as trans, but I still feel like what they've done with this character totally counts as transphobic.
Yes.
Because the world's... I don't know, because...
Well, I think the transphobia does stem from the fact, well, obviously the measures Ace goes to like clean himself after Lois kisses him. He's obviously blamed transphobia and like homophobia to an extent because he views her as a man.
He calls her a man, or they.
They do.
Let's stick with they.
Yes. And, I mean, the whole transphobia thing comes from the fact that they are, regardless of the fact that if the Ray to Lois character is technically a trans character, they constantly misgender the person. That's where the transphobia comes from, the fact that, like, Ace is disgusted by the fact that he, like, kissed her.
Yeah. And
that's where it comes from.
And my main problem with that, not just because it's utterly vile and is not treating people with the rights that they deserve. Granted, the discussion on transgender people has how it's evolved within the past decade, let alone in the past. It's evolved more now within the past decade than it probably has in the entire century leading up to it in the general public consciousness. To the point where I just watched this movie called Miracle Mile a couple of days ago, and there's a character who is very obviously trans in it, that is portrayed, and they're like all gaudied up. I think the implication is that they were a transsexual hooker, because they worked in the night, etc., and they had the makeup on, and all the stereotypical things that were applied with, at that time, they would call it a transvestite, and it's one of the few characters in the movie that actually doesn't have a name. They're just credited as transvestite, which is very unfortunate because they have like 15 lines and they're in a very important scene. The actor who plays that character with such a level of dignity that was rarely applied to transgendered people's representation of film. I mean, it's basically Chris Sarandon in Dog Day Afternoon. It's that, and even that's questionable. And you know, there's all sorts of controversial stuff with Silence of the Lambs, which is totally fair. And as a cis white person, I cannot blame anyone who has an issue with it. Silence of the Lambs does specifically say that Buffalo Bill is not transsexual. Like, there's a scene where I think it's with Scott Glenn's character where they specifically go into it. But obviously, when you have the bigger point I was trying to make, when you have a lack of positive and three-dimensional portrayals of this minority group, any portrayal that is utterly disregardative is harmful by nature. I feel like Ace Ventura actually is actively harmful, but it's punching down, which is like the worst form of comedy.
Well, obviously the most harmful aspect of it is the fact that any young trans person in the 90s sees that and they see it purely as a joke.
Yeah.
Obviously, we can't speak to that kind of, like, the pain that must cause, but that must be soul crushing for people.
They basically treat the character as subhuman.
Yes.
Yeah.
The fact that they're touched makes the fact that they revealed the fact that the cops like vomiting and Dan asks you has the more gum. It's
not only, but the main problem with it, the point I was trying to get to, besides the fact that it's despicable how they portray transsexual people and homosexual people in this movie, is that they want to have their cake and eat it too. Because Sean Young, throughout this movie, including the reveal until the very end, is presented as a sexual object. Mm-hmm. And the problem with them reacting so vilely to the reveal that it's actually Ray Fisher, however you want to classify this character. Ray Finkel, sorry.
There you go.
Isn't Ray Fisher the guy who plays Cyborg?
Yes, it is. You said Fisher a couple times, like, he'll get it again, Cotter. Don't interrupt him. I was like,
my apologies to Ray Fisher. Is that obviously the reason they're all reacting so violently, the implication is because they all wanted to fuck her. Mm-hmm. But now that she's a man, or they're a man, or whatever, they're suddenly, like, disgusted by it. And to the point where the reveal is just like, it's taking off her top, and then it's taking off her pants, and then you turn her, like, it's so hyper-sexualized. Mm-hmm. And that's the problem. They want their cake and eat it too. Not only do we want to get whatever sort of TNA out of this movie possible, but then we're going to undercut it because they're not worthy of us being even attracted to them.
Yes.
It's just fucking gross.
Anytime you're playing, like, whether or not we classify the lowest character as trans or not, you're playing a perceived trans character for comedy is just no bueno. It's just, it's not good. Yeah. Anytime you're approaching, like, that group with that kind of, like, harmful lens, I'm not saying there can't be comedies that star trans characters. It'd actually be pretty fucking rad if, like, they made a comedy that's about not making fun of them, obviously, but just happen to feature two trans characters as your lead.
I mean, that's basically what Tangerine is.
Yes, it is.
Tangerine is probably more. It also has some heavily dramatic moments, and it goes into the realities of those two characters.
Anytime, like you said, you're actively making fun of a group that is systemically had like people have been fucking against them from the beginning. Yeah, it's just not cool.
No, and the problem is, it's like if that was the only thing that aged poorly, I mean, obviously it would still. I mean, I wouldn't, even if, like, that was the only problem, I still wouldn't like the movie. But the other problem is that the movie preceding it is also bad. Yeah. Because we've delved into the transphobic things of this movie, which is why this movie has been, sort of disregarded after the fact, because it wasn't an issue at the time. No. This movie's a big hit. I'm sure there's a lot of people who had their views at a young age affected by this movie, and for a lot of them that will probably be with them forever, and it probably took a lot of people a lot of active unlearning and relearning because that's what life is. The hope is that we all try to get better. But I feel like there's not much. I mean, it's messy material. No, I don't think we have the words.
There's not much to say other than the fact that you've said it a couple of times. It's just despicable. Yeah. There's no justification for it. Yeah. There's no way, like, anyone in their right mind and right moral conscience can condone it. It's just flat out gross. Yeah. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's just gross.
So I want to get into the one other homophobic joke in this movie.
The urinal?
Yeah. So the whole idea of the urinal, it starts out as a pretty decent but aged joke for sure. Yes. Where Ace is trying to look at the ring and he's looking over the urinal stall, and you expect this big ex-football player to, like, beat him up or something because he thinks that Ace is gay. Still not great, but you could disregard it was like, well, that aggro guy is not a good guy.
Yes, that's a product of the 90s, is that he thinks looking at his dick, and then he beats him up. That's a product of the time.
But instead, the reveal that the football player is actually homosexual itself might be a decent joke, but then you see the utter disgust on Ace's face once again. Again, it's the idea that not only is this a misunderstanding and now Ace is in a situation that he doesn't know how to get into, he is actively reviled by this person. And then instantly the guy starts acting like...
He starts literally prancing, like, after him.
Yeah, and he's doing, like, a little thing, and it's just... And then
No.
it goes to the utmost stereotype about, you know, the flamboyancy of gay men.
Yeah, if the joke had... Well, here's the... It's still not great, but if the joke had ended where Ace looks over, the guy smiles at him, end of joke. Product of its time, end of joke.
Not the worst, not great.
Not the worst. No, it's like, that's a joke I could look at and be like, the 90s, weren't they crap? You know
It's
what
also
I mean?
like a fairly decent, like, well, we've reverted expectations.
Yes.
And then...
But when the joke comes with Ace... like, disgusted at the idea of this man being attracted to him, like, literal disgust, and then the man literally prancing after him, it's insane. Yeah. That's one of my negatives that I wrote the urinal scene, because it's insane.
And again, I feel like, I mean, percentage-wise, it's probably only, like, 15% of this movie in terms of, like, things on screen that we would not consider politically correct.
Yes.
But, again, it's not... Because, I don't know, I'm imagining some rando coming in on here and calling us the PC.
Calling us SJWs.
It's not the same as something like... Whatever. The point I'm trying to say is, it's not this movie is aged poorly because it's no longer considered politically correct or whatever, because social standards have changed in the 26 years since this movie has come out or whatever.
94, 26.
It's just that the movie itself isn't good.
It happens that it's really problematic stuff in a not very good movie.
No. That probably had 5 things that made me laugh.
Yeah.
Total.
Thank God Dumb and Dumber doesn't have the same problem.
Yeah.
But, there's one scene we'll talk about regarding this when you do watch Dumb and Dumber.
Yeah.
But with the exception of that scene, which if you know what I'm talking about, I'm talking about the sea bass scene. With the exception of that scene, that movie is not harmful.
Yeah.
From what I recall, I haven't seen it in a couple years now, but it's not harmful. This movie, on top of being not very funny, like Dumb and Dumber is just harmful.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's just disgusting. And while that's only 15% of the movie, it's 15% of nasty, like, garbage treatment of, like, human beings.
Yeah.
With a movie that's like I think it's like you, I laughed like 3 times, and the 3 times laughed like in the first like 5 minutes of the movie.
Yeah. So I wanted to save this discussion for later in the episode, but now it's out of the way, and I have a couple of things that I want to talk about, and then we can pretty much wrap up.
No, that is the elephant in the room. Is this movie's disgusting portrayal of trans and gay people? It's ridiculous.
The main issue, besides the things that we have stated before, aged terribly, the main issue with this movie is that, Connor, what is the internal logic within Ace Ventura: Pet Detective? What is the overall joke here?
The joke is he's a zany guy, Steve.
So I was trying to think of movies similar to this. Mm-hmm. And the main 2 that I could think of were Wayne's World and Fletch. I'm assuming you haven't seen either.
I've seen neither. I've seen neither of those 2 movies.
So Wayne's World, I think, comes out 2 years before this. And is an adaptation of the SNL sketch. And the whole joke of Wayne's World is that Wayne and Garth are losers. What we would classify as losers, 2 guys that hang out in basements and wax philosophic about rock bands, and they're not terribly smart. But the thing that Wayne and Garth have is that, A, they have this Bugs Bunny thing where every now and again they break the 4th wall, so you're already establishing that we're playing sort of fast and loose with real-world logic. This is a heightened reality. But every character that is not Wayne and Garth could exist in real life to a certain extent. And even Wayne and Garth is not outside the realm of possibility. For one thing, they portray these 2 characters with a fair amount of love and affection, whereas they are not, high lauded members of society. They're shown as 2 people that really care about each other and are like decent human beings. They are not the butt of jokes, and every now and again they will make fun of other people, but it's usually people that deserve it. It's usually people who themselves are outwardly cynical. And that's part of the reasons that, as an audience member, you grow affection for Wayne and Garth, because you know deep down they're good guys. And also, the whole point of the movie is that the rest of the world is reacting to these two. And Fletch is probably the closest in terms of structure in this movie, in which Chevy Chase plays a private eye. It's sort of a riff on a Philip Marlowe type story. But the whole thing about Fletch is that it's a totally normal sort of like crime plot, the type of thing that you would normally see in a private eye movie, but it's Chevy Chase, so he's making all sorts of one-liners and he's making all sorts of jokes. But the whole point is that he's like one step out of what we establish as a fairly normal reality. Whereas Ace Ventura acts like a fucking maniac and nobody reacts to it properly. Mm-hmm. Like, the straight men within this movie, which are given the most thankless task, are not reacting in a way that sets up jokes. It's just Jim Carrey doing weird shtick and people treating it as if it's normal. The main example that I have with this problem is the section where they go into the insane asylum. Which, yes, again, problematic portrayals of a crazy person. But if this was, and, you know, Ace Ventura with the crazy hair and the fucking tutu, and he's doing all sorts of random football jargon and he's bouncing over bushes and stuff, it would be one thing if this was the only time that this character acted like this. And everyone's like, well, obviously he's crazy. But this is interchangeable with any joke that he makes before or after in the movie, and no one else reacts to it that way. Mm-hmm. Again, it's the movie wants to have its cake and eat it too. Yeah. It's telling you that now he's acting crazy because other characters are actively telling you.
Yes. Could have been based on the setting. Like, yes, now he's in a mental asylum, so now he's crazy.
Yeah. Whereas I stand by, most of the jokes that he makes there are completely interchangeable when he first comes to the fucking stadium, this, that, and the other thing. And the last logic thing that just drove me up a wall, his little friend, whose lab is like in a metal club. Yeah. One of the few things that made me laugh is this insane metal pseudo like street punk concert is happening, and there's all these different, you know, headbangers and mosh pits, and people are punching each other and all sorts of shit, and just dorky Ace Ventura is in a situation where he doesn't belong. Mm-hmm. And it's obvious that he doesn't belong, and they do good gags where he's like, have you seen, I don't know, Doug or whatever, and the guy just can't hear him because of the music.
Yeah, and he's headbanging, and he's like, thank you.
That's what this movie should be. Yeah. But also, there's no context of what leads into that. Like, the movie just sort of drifts until the plot finally picks up. Yeah. And then, like, what is his friend where he's, like, in this underground lair where he has to give a password and stuff? Who is this person? What do they do for a living? Are they a scientist? Do they, like, steal shit? And, like, and he never comes back again.
No, I don't think we ever, I think he says his name when he's talking to the headbanging guy. He's only in that one scene. From what I recall, he's not in When Nature Calls. From what I gather, he's just a guy who, like, cares for animals like Ace. Like, there's the whole whaling thing where he, like, diverts the ships. I think he's just a guy that cares about animals that happens to live in this, like, weird lab. Yeah. And what he is, he's a character there so you can, like, find out about, I forget what he tells him about, what he tells Ace about.
He tells him about...
the rich guy. He tells him about the rich guy, how he collects fish. Yeah, Udo Kier collects fish. That's the information we get from that guy. That guy is a screenwriter being like, how do we have him find out about the Udo Kier character?
He has a friend who's a hacker. And then they just drop it entirely. Yeah. And it's just like, we have this one problem that we need a solution for. They come with a solution, and they don't incorporate it into the rest of the movie.
He's one of the writers going, oh, yeah, what about this? That's what that guy is.
And the other problem I have with the Ace character, besides the fact that he's utterly unpleasant, and I can't imagine why anyone would tolerate his behavior, let alone why Courtney Cox would fall for him.
Yeah, when he just calls Courtney Cox fat, and then the next day she's like, oh, Ace, you're so dreamy.
Jim Carrey's a credited screenwriter. I feel like it's Ace Ventura is the ultimate example of just obnoxious white men living out their uttermost fantasies when it's completely unjustified within the film that they've made. And
because this was the year Friends started.
It was right before Friends started.
So she was still
Friends
the
premiered
Bruce
that
Springsteen
fall.
girl.
Yeah. And the girl in the Masters of the Universe movie.
Mm-hmm.
What the fuck was I talking about before we got to Courtney Cox? Oh, Ace, his relationship, he's really connected to animals when they want him to be.
Yes.
I want that to be more of a through line. And, because I'm really digging, like, the idea of, like, he feels a connection to animals because he can't relate to other humans, and, like, it's a more natural sort of... Because they dance around it, but they never fully establish anything.
You know who does that very well is, I know you haven't seen the movies, but Newt Scamander in the Fantastic Beasts movies.
Yeah.
He has a natural connection to these beasts, and he actually identifies and cares for them. You don't get that with Ace.
No.
You get that he, like, cares about animals, but he never, like, actively shows it.
Yeah.
Like, he's actually kind of rude to his animals a little bit. Like, not, like, physically, obviously, but, like, he, like, berates the monkey or something.
The one fucking joke that he makes about the dog, and it's one of the few good scenes of him with an animal, is just, like, the dog is on him and not Courtney Cox, which is interesting because based on the setting, we know she's the owner. So as an audience, we're just like, the dog is having natural inclination to him. The dog has laid his head on Jim Carrey's arm, and he's like, what do you feed the dog? And she's like, dog food. And he's like, he's fucking miserable. You feed him garbage, you have him in a confined space, which is a very nice backyard. And all I can think about is earlier, he has 24 animals in his tiny-ass compartment. What about that confined space, Ace?
No, I'll tell you the times I laughed. The times I laughed through the entirety of the cardboard box bit. Like the fragile glassware. Oh, I don't know. That's just, I love that so much. That's so funny to me.
In a better movie, which I was enjoying more up to that point, I probably would have enjoyed it more. Oh. Like the whole bit where it's like, because when they finally close the door, and Jesus, my phone fell again. When the orderly closes the door and you reveal like his leg is sticking up and things.
Oh no, not that bit. I'm talking about the beginning with the fragile box.
Oh,
the glass.
Okay. I laughed once during that entire thing, and it's when he starts the car. And he's like, it gets flooded. It'll be fine. We can wait. And then the guy with the baseball bat comes and he bashes in the rear window. That's the one time I laughed during that entire scene. That's a very, very good cut.
Mm-hmm. And there's, the blowjob scene is ridiculous. But I got a chuckle out of that, too. Him holding onto the banister.
I know what you're talking about. And it's just one of those things where, like, in theory, this joke is a good concept. But it's just the tone of this movie is so off.
Yeah.
That I can never get a hang on how I'm supposed to react.
No, I get that.
Like, is this a very physical comedy based movie? Is it a one-liner based movie? Like, there are films that like balance these different styles of comedy well. Like when you said blowjob scene, all I could think about was the blowjob scene in Airplane, which I think is a much better set up joke for one thing, and B actually fits and has a level of consistency with the jokes that predicated it before in that movie. What else? What else did you enjoy?
Those are my 3 positives.
Jesus Christ.
Here's the thing. There's one thing that was remotely funny is in the mental asylum when he slams his head on the bench. That's just a bit of physical comedy is just funny to me. I cracked a smile at that.
And she says he thinks it's halftime, so he'll probably be there for about 20 minutes.
20 minutes, yeah. That's a good bit. I liked, just because I got the reference now, because I recently watched Poltergeist. I got that reference.
Which reference? Just
when he's in Jerry's apartment, and he does like the woman's voice.
Yeah,
it's like, I've cleared it of demons. I cannot do that impression. Obviously, I'm nowhere near as talented as
very specific voice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that scene in the apartment where he like figures out the soundproof door and things like that. Mm-hmm. That scene actually works pretty well because he's being a good detective.
Yeah.
Which rarely does this movie showcase that sort of thing.
No, he only does it really twice. It's the stone in the filter and that.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Yeah. Do we have anything left to say? I've gone through.
I mean, I haven't even
We've
done.
talked for an hour.
We have.
It will probably be shorter than that. It'll probably be closer to 50 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, we already talked about negatives. I love Jim Carrey. I hate Ace Ventura. There's nothing to like about that man. He's not remotely charming.
No, it's a bad character. It's the whole thing. It's beyond half-baked. It's like it's barely been in the oven.
Yeah, no.
There's probably a good movie in here somewhere. Like, I've named, like, 6 different movies that are similar to it that are better examples of this type of thing.
I don't know, it's... Yeah, the whole movie, there's just nothing to it. Another thing that bothered me, because you know me, I'm a very serious guy when it comes to these things for some dumb reason. I didn't like the complete lack of stakes in the movie. Like, the shark attack thing, and his car rolls, and he's perfectly fine.
I was completely thrown off by the car rolling.
Yeah.
That was another thing that kind of got me, where he was... I like the one bit that they continue, that now that his window is smashed, he's just sticking his head out the car window. And it's the way they establish it is really good, because the dog is sticking his head out the window, and then they pan and he's doing the same. And then the way they continue with that throughout the movie.
Yeah.
I feel like that's one of the few gags that actually pays off.
Yeah. Obviously, it's a struggle to care for Ace to begin with.
Yes.
But I'm not invested in his safety, because obviously you've shown me the guy is indestructible.
Yeah.
I
think they wanted him to be Bugs Bunny.
Yeah.
But the thing with Bugs Bunny, like I've been saying before, is that Bugs Bunny has his own logic. And Bugs Bunny interacts with the world around him in a way that no one else in that world can.
Mm-hmm. And
Bugs Bunny has a specific target. Bugs Bunny doesn't punch down. Bugs Bunny is usually attacking people who we as an audience would know to be as quote-unquote bad people. Hunters, gangsters, cowboys. Like people who are inciting violence either on him, so it's self-defensive, or they're attacking others, so he's doing it as a means to help other people.
Yes. I don't know. Yeah, without, obviously we'll talk about it when we talk about The Mask and Dumb and Dumber.
Yeah.
But both those movies have, very present danger in them.
Yes.
Where
The Mask especially.
The Mask especially, yeah. Where even, where he's, literally, dodging bullets. Mm-hmm. Oh, him catching the bullet in his teeth is the epitome of that. It's I don't care anymore. I don't care about this character's, safety. I'm not actively invested if, he gets, when the car rolled, I was oh, whatever. My brain, shut off. I was he's gonna be fine.
The bullet catch I actually like because it is so absurd.
I don't know. It's
just, I feel, and I would be easier with a shark. The car rolling, I feel doesn't work because it's too real.
Yeah.
When the car started rolling in the movie, I was startled because it looked it looked like someone could actually get hurt in that.
Yeah.
Whereas when it's a shark attack and he's basically doing the same movement that the girl in the beginning of Jaws is doing, but it's obvious there's no blood or anything, he's gonna be fine. If you're gonna go for that level of craziness that no one else in this world could survive this, but Ace Ventura can to a Bugs Bunny to extent, that's one thing. But they don't repeat that heightened level of behavior.
No, well, but it made the car funny is at the end of it he has a scraped knee. Yeah. That would have been funny. Yeah. That would have been an actual joke. Yeah. But him just rolling and he's just fine. It's just incredible.
And him getting punched and the implant of the ring, things like that. That actually works.
That's funny.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just, we'll get into this more probably, especially when we rewatch them. But I have a feeling with The Mask and Dumb and Dumber, the things that those movies have that this doesn't, amongst a number of things. But the main point I'm going to focus on is that those are two characters that work on their own, that Jim Carrey, through his natural gifts, are able to elevate. Whereas Ace Ventura, without Jim Carrey, is not a character.
Was this written for Jim, explicitly?
I don't know exactly the development, but he's one of the credited screenwriters. I think this is partly his brainchild.
I think where I took it was the screen credit was he improvised so much they just had to give him a writing credit, the kind of thing with the Before trilogy, where it's they improvise so much that's kind of a thing where it's they are now writers.
With the later Befores, I think with Midnight. They were actually involved at the scripting level.
Okay.
I think with Sunset, it was because of the improvisation.
Because The Mask and Dumb and Dumber were not written for Jim Carrey.
Yeah.
And I think those were, like, the actual, like, well-developed, like, interesting... Because here's the thing. Lloyd Christmas and Stanley Ipkiss, I love them.
Okay.
Like, they can be played by anybody, and they're still great written, interesting characters.
Yeah. But it's having two amazing actors of Jim
Yes.
Carrey and Jeff Daniels levels, like, certainly elevates. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, and
Yeah.
The Mask especially. Because the thing, I mean, we'll go into it, but The Mask is sort of a reverse Clark Kent. Without the mask on, he is a mild-mannered, you know, totally, like, quote-unquote normal guy. And Jim Carrey plays that very well. And it is the contrast of how he behaves with the mask on
Yeah.
so you're developing a man who is at odds with himself. So according to Wikipedia, chairman and CEO of Morgan Creek Productions, James G. Robinson, who is also the main producer on this, sought to produce a comedy that would have wide appeal. Gag writer Tom Shadyac had this script, and he pitched a rewrite, and he was hired to direct, and it would be his directorial debut. Filmmakers first approached Rick Moranis to play Ace Ventura, and Moranis declined. I don't know when Rick Moranis' wife died, but I know it was around this era that he started working less and less. Where was I? They then considered Judd Nelson or Alan Rickman. So, like,
Yeah.
they did not have a set character. They had an idea, a private eye who fits, you know, who specializes in missing animals and stuff. And then I think as soon as a star was attached, they would be able to write the movie around him. They also considered Whoopi Goldberg. Ultimately, the producers noticed Jim Carrey's performance in Living Color, and they cast him. And then Carrey helped rewrite the script, and also he improvised on set.
When did The Crying Game come out?
The Crying Game, I believe, came out 92.
Okay, so I wonder if that had any like influence
92.
on them, like taking the lowest angle.
I think the bigger inspiration was Silence of the Lambs, because he mentions Hannibal Lecter in a gag. He just says, "Seems like a nice cozy place if you're Hannibal Lecter." And then also when they rip her skirt, she's doing the tuck pose.
Oh yeah, she is.
So I think Silence of the Lambs, which was a bigger hit than The Crying Game, The Crying Game did make a big splash when it came out, was probably more of what they were riffing on. But Carrey was involved with the actual, like, writing process. It wasn't just because he was improvising, though he did improvise.
Yeah, okay. I mean, are you ready to close it out?
I guess. I don't know. What the fuck is there left to say? We've probably talked about this movie too long already.
Yeah, we have. I mean, we talked more about the issues the movie raises than the movie itself.
Well, the movie, it's a nothing burger of a movie.
Exactly, yeah. Now, I always look forward to talking to you. But this was the one I was looking forward to talking about the least, because it's like, I have nothing really positive with the exception of, like, 2 bits to say about this movie.
Yeah.
It's like, I struggled for a while. Like, you give it a 1.5, I give it a 2 on Letterboxd.
Yeah. I
was struggling. I at least gave it a 2 because, like, I at least think Jim Carrey, while I don't like Ace, I still like him in this movie.
Yeah.
And I know where that kind of energy evolves and, like, where it gets more reserved and actually more effective in The Mask and Dumb and Dumber.
Yeah.
Which is crazy saying The Mask is more reserved than this, but...
Well, The Mask knows
what it is, yeah.
And The Mask takes the cartoonishness of Jim Carrey to that Looney Tunes type extent, but only when he's in that heightened form wearing the mask, and the rest of it, it's like kind of a crime caper. So I briefly want to talk about, with all 3 of these movies, but this one especially, the box office. So Jim Carrey is leaving Living Color around this time, partly because he booked this part. And then, you know, I will get into it more with The Mask, but he was cast in The Mask very shortly thereafter because, you know, he's getting his own movie. They're developing his own movie, so there's buzz around that, and they cast him for similar reasons because he made such a splash on Living Color. This movie opens on February 4th of 1994 in 1,700 theaters, and it makes $12 million. And then for the next 4 weeks, it adds another 200 theaters, so it's closer to 1,900. And it's a steady player. And then it plays for 11 total weeks, and it ends up at over $100 million, which is like a very respectable
Yeah.
opening performance for like a fairly cheap comedy producer, cost $15 million, and with an actor who was not a proven commodity in movies. He had been in movies, he'd even starred in a movie before, but like the poster is just Jim Carrey. It's him, and it says Jim Carrey at the top, and he's holding the Ace Ventura card, and like it is this sort of announcement of like, hey, this might be the next big thing. And it's a respectable performance. It's a more than respectable performance. It's a sizable hit, but it's the next two that come that even outperform that. Is that like I mentioned earlier, really cements him as like, this is a cataclysmic introduction into film. And the whole thing we were talking about earlier is that 2 weeks after this movie opens, it's already well made its budget back. It's not going to leave theaters anytime soon. They sign on. Jim Carrey was in active negotiations for Dumb and Dumber when this movie was about to come out. The movie comes out, he's suddenly the new big star, and his price just skyrockets. If they had signed him 2 weeks earlier, they would have gotten him for a fraction of the cost. And then Courtney Cox, we didn't really talk about much because she's not an entity in this movie, really.
Yeah.
She's the only person who's not disgusted by the Lois reveal.
Yeah. Because we get that she's actually a somewhat kind, understanding person.
I guess she's not a character.
No, well, that's the things we know about her is that she's kind, understanding, and pretty, and she knows about sports.
And she's a business lady,
Yes, those are what we get about her character.
Whatever. What are you looking up?
I'm looking up exactly how much. Okay, he got paid $7 million for Dumb and Dumber.
Okay.
And guess how much Jeff Daniels made?
50,000.
You were right. So I'm not good at math. That's a pretty big jump.
It's Jeff Daniels got less than
1%. Like, right?
No.
50,000 to 7 million?
Because okay, so what's 1/7? I imagine 1% would be 70,000.
Yeah, times 0. Oh, dumb and dumb butt. Hold on.
Dumb and dumb butt. That's what they should have called it.
Dumb and dumb butt. The point here, we'll have a spirited debate. Who's dumb and who's dumber? Am I right?
Jeff Daniels is dumber.
Well, way to ruin the spirited debate.
I mean, we'll get into it. Do you disagree?
No, I don't know. It's just a bit.
I mean, I'll probably reevaluate when I rewatch the movie, but my impression that Jim Carrey was dumb and Jeff Daniels was dumber. They sort of even each other out is the thing.
Yeah, dude, that is it's 0.7%.
Yeah, so it's
so
less
it's
than
70% of 1%. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, he got paid less than 1% of Jim Carrey's earnings. Just insane.
Hey man, it was probably more even for the sequel.
Yeah, it was. I think if I recall correctly,
Because
Jim Carrey said that he
weirdly-
wanted it equal.
Well, not only that, but Jim Carrey's star has incredibly diminished between the two. And
Yeah.
weirdly, Jeff Daniels' star only gets brighter.
Mm-hmm.
He's been acting for like 40 years, and he weirdly only gets bigger. Because like that was
Yeah.
like just after The Newsroom.
He just keeps making really interesting projects.
Well, he's a great actor.
Yeah, too. Yeah. Well, I would argue here's the thing. Well, we're not approaching a lot of Jim's like serious work. I would argue Jim Carrey is an exceptional actor. Same thing people say about Adam Sandler. He's an exceptional actor. He just doesn't always pick scripts that show that.
No, here's the thing. Jim Carrey does have a very impressive range. But he tends to only go to the most dramatic ends of that range. It's
Yeah.
either complete Tasmanian devil or extremely reserved.
Yeah.
And also, how people discuss great actors, I feel like is fairly reductive. I feel like they point to method far too often. I mean, we've discussed this. You and I have very differing feelings on that.
We have, yeah.
But his Andy Kaufman performance is like the textbook example of the masturbatory version of method.
Yes.
And we're not going to talk about Man on the Moon, so I won't really go into it. There's people who will make arguments
watch
defending
Jim and
it.
Andy if you want to know about that. But
Yeah. But even to the point, because, like, he didn't really go method with The Grinch. There's just a story that I love. It's just... So Jim Carrey has had a series of mental health issues, mainly with depression, and he's been fairly vocal about it. But when he was making the Grinch, the makeup was so obtrusive and and the process took like 6 hours. I think it took like 6 hours to get on and like 2 hours to get off. And it's just because it's a lot of paint, it's fur, it's heavy, it's hot. You're like suffocating with the amount of like paint that's on you. That the only thing that would calm him down is if they played the Bee Gees. Like he was just like, we just had like the ultra deluxe Bee Gees greatest hit set, and it just needed to be on the entire time, and we would play it as many times as it took to put it on. It's like the one thing that would calm him down. Mm-hmm. So actors are kooky people because they have an extremely difficult job, and a lot of them tend to have mental health issues, whether because they're actors or it's just there's a weird alliance of the type of people who tend to have mental health issues and those who are attracted to a career such as acting. We could go on and on and on about
That's
all
a whole
sorts of
other
things
can of worms
that we are not qualified to talk about in any
Yes.
But
isn't that what this is for? For two white guys talking about shit they're not like qualified to talk about? Isn't that what the internet's for?
I feel like I feel like we're just describing a podcast.
Yeah, we are.
So yeah, this is going to be an interesting journey. I feel like it's only going to be up from here.
Oh,
I
Steve,
don't
that's
know.
the understatement of the fucking century. Are you
But
kidding
here's the
me?
thing: I don't know how I'll react to the two movies that are coming up. I don't know if I'll like them, if my nostalgia will have worn off.
Well, at the very least,
they're definitely better than
I can confidently say, at the very least, The Mask is not as bad as this movie. I have not watched The Mask in I think 3 years. I do not have there's not a 0.007% of a chance that I will like.
I have not watched it in at least a decade. So
yeah.
It'll be at the bare minimum, both of them will be better than Pet Detective.
At the very least, The Mask is a passable movie. At the very, very least.
Well, I'm talking about both of them.
Oh, Dumb and Dumber's a classic. Okay, that's not a... Here's the...
I'm talking about my reaction, just mine.
Yeah, whether or not you'll be wrong about Dumb and Dumber, yes.
Connor, we're 33% away through our year. Our year of... In the year of... Oh, I fucking forgot to do in the year of our Lord thing.
Yeah.
Ace Ventura...
It's okay. Ace doesn't deserve it.
No, we'll do it with The Mask. We'll
start with The Mask. It doesn't
This
deserve
really
it.
is in the year of our Lord. Our Lord, I guess, being Jim Carrey.
Jim Carrey.
Oh my god. Anyway, folks, thank you for watching this dumpster fire. We promise the next two will be way more fun.
Because the movies are actually fun.
Yeah. And we'll... God. This is the worst movie we've talked about in the show, right?
By a country mile, Steve. Here's the thing, with like our lists in order, The Wolverine, in my opinion, was the worst movie we talked about last time.
Yeah.
I'd fucking like Clockwork Orange The Wolverine before I watch Ace Ventura again.
Part of me wants to watch When Nature Calls.
Don't.
I feel like, is that movie really racist, though? Is there like a bunch of native stuff in that?
Yes. He goes to Africa.
Yeah, no.
It's not...
The one thing that this movie is not, which is actively racist.
Yeah, they're like, okay, so we got homophobia, we got transphobia. What do we got
missing? Attack this time?
Oh, we got racism. Good old-fashioned racism. And xenophobia, too.
Connor?
Yes, Steve?
Thank you for starting this new series with me.
I wish we started off on a much higher note.
Thank you. But hey, this is an important movie, both for his career and I guess culturally, God.
Yeah.
It's so weird because this really is the one that kicks it off, but I feel like this has slight more cultural relevancy than The Mask. For some reason, The Mask has disappeared in popular culture, though that should definitely be flipped.
Mm-hmm.
But, hey,
Dumb and Dumber should be taught in every film school.
It's a short series. After Green Book, I don't want anything that the Farrelly brothers do to be taught in film school.
That's true.
God. Part of Dumb and Dumber is definitely going to be Green Book chat.
The biggest cinema glowdown in history. Dumb and Dumber to Green Book.
Kingpin to Green Book. Jesus Christ. Meet the Deedles to Green Book.
Yeah.
Or no, it's stuck.
Dumb and Dumber 2 to Green Book.
Can I make a controversial claim?
If as long as it's not anti Dumb and Dumber.
It's not anti-Dumb and Dumber. I think Dumb and Dumber is a better title than Dumb or Dumber 2.
Okay, here's the thing.
I like the.
I
It's
don't
just T.O.
disagree with you.
Yeah.
I refuse to give any positive attention to Dumber and Dumber or How Harry Met Lloyd.
I even like that it's called When Harry Met Lloyd.
No,
it's a fun title for an
if you want to talk
movie.
about movies that are offensive,
I will never watch a frame of that movie.
have you not seen the
I've
shit
seen a
they
trailer.
do when they talk about like people in special education programs is horrendous.
See, that's the thing, and we'll get about this when we get to Dumb and Dumber. But Dumb and Dumber, they are, obviously the characters are dumb. And it'd be so easy to delve into, like, R-word territory.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't.
They don't. Because it's a responsible, not problematic movie. Unlike the cinematic drivel that is Dumber and Dumber or Harry Met Lloyd. Steve, I don't know if I expressed to you, that's my least favorite movie of all time.
Join us next time on JC94 when we talk about The Mask, directed by... Who directed The Mask?
Couldn't tell you.
We'll learn by next time.
Yeah.
Connor, good morning.
Yes, Steve.
And in case I don't see you,
Good afternoon.
good evening.
And good night.